Corey, how do you always look so bougie? How do you always look so nice when you're on a budget? Let me tell you my secret. Credit card debt, Afterpay, Klarna. Is it the most financially responsible? No, but that's okay because the debt will disappear someday.
So imagine this. You are out to dinner, the check comes, and the waiter mentions that instead of paying for your $50 meal all at once right now, you could instead finance your meal by paying in $5, $10 installments over the next few months. What do you say? Do you do it? The question sounds bizarre, and yet this is not some hypothetical. You can actually do this. Yeah, in the past, financing was reserved for big ticket items like a home or a car, both things that I've talked about in recent videos on being house poor and car poor. But these days, you can literally finance your lunch at a restaurant or your DoorDash drinks. That is right, as of this month with the new Klarna and DoorDash deal, people are literally out here financing their $15 pizzas and their $20 sushi takeout dinners through what's known as buy now, pay later. It's insane to think about, but the trend of buy now, pay later is hotter than ever. 1 out of 5 US consumers have used buy now, pay later, with millennials at the highest usage rate. According to Statista, 56%, over half of millennials have used buy now, pay later for a purchase, and 49% of Gen Z have done the same.
Could you imagine given the opportunity to default on a loan on a Chipotle burrito in 2025?
You watching this right now might have used buy now, pay later before, or at the very least, you've seen it when shopping. It seemingly is this way to spend less money, at least in the moment. Yeah, you'll have some future payments, but the payments are small and they're interest-free. Plus, it would be nice to spread out the cost so that you can wait for your next paycheck or two. All around, seems like a win. But as good as this sounds, this video would not be made if it was all good news, you know? Unsurprisingly, there is a whole lot more to this story. So in today's video, let's talk about the good and the bad of buy now, pay later, the psychology behind why we are so tempted by it, and the smart ways that you can successfully use buy now, pay later without falling into a debt trap. But first, a huge thank you to today's sponsor, Strawberry.me, for supporting this channel. Their whole belief is that personal coaching should be accessible to everyone, and I actually started working with one of their certified coaches recently because I've been feeling kind of stuck professionally and personally the past few months. I won't get into the details, but I'm basically struggling with this tension between pursuing peace/complacency versus ambition and challenges. It's a whole thing, and it's something that I was struggling to talk to people in my life about. So what I really appreciated about Strawberry.me is that they paired me with a coach that didn't just listen and nod along. They are actively helping me problem solve, giving me clear frameworks to think through my choices, relevant worksheets to check out, and most importantly, helping me stay accountable so I can actually take action instead of just staying in my own head, which is something that I tend to do and I don't love when I do. To be clear, coaching is not therapy. I like to think of therapy more as processing the past and how that's showing up in my present, whereas coaching for me is more about planning for the future and being able to be more prescriptive with next steps. If you're at a crossroads in your career, trying to navigate a job change, move into leadership, or just figure out what's next, coaching through Strawberry.me can be a game changer. It is practical, it's goal-oriented, focused support from real certified professionals trained to help you grow. And honestly, so much of the spending behavior that we're talking about today, impulse purchases, instant gratification, often comes from feeling ungrounded or disconnected from what we actually want in life. Coaching helps you zoom out and get clear and make intentional moves, financially, professionally, and personally. So if you're curious, head to strawberry.me/Kara to get started with a $50 credit. That is right. Right now, they are giving you guys a $50 credit for coaching. That's strawberry.me/Kara, C-A-R-A, which I will also link down below. Go check them out, and a huge, huge thank you to strawberry.me for sponsoring today's video. So like we mentioned before, on the surface, buy now, pay later doesn't sound like a completely bad idea. Interestingly, it stems from a much older idea from the early 1900s called a layaway program. With layaway programs, a customer could reserve a big ticket item like a piano, put a deposit down, and then pay off the item in installments over a set time. Once the final payment was paid, then the customer could pick up their reserved item. Layaway programs like today's buy now, pay later were designed for people on a budget, letting them break up payments instead of paying a lump sum up front. But here is the big difference between the two. With a layaway program, you only get to pick up your item once you've paid off the entire thing. Before that, it's just being reserved for you. But with buy now, pay later, you get whatever you want to buy immediately. There's literally no waiting or saving for it. That is part of the psychological draw that lures us in. Instant gratification. Our brains prefer to have a reward now rather than wait for some unknown future moment. That instant gratification of impulsively buying something online gives us a dopamine rush that our brains crave. Now, you might not know where that money's gonna come from to pay off the purchase, but it doesn't matter. You still get to take it home. The payments are for future you to worry about. And that right there is the problem. I came across this story of a 26-year-old who fell into $4,000 of debt from using buy now, pay later platforms like Klarna and VeryPay to fuel her shopping addiction. And this quote of hers stood out to me. Quote, "It feels like free money and makes it so much easier to buy something." Part of why I think this is because buy now, pay later schemes are letting us finance smaller and smaller purchases. Like that burrito clip that I showed you earlier, there are really people out here financing $11 Chipotle burritos. For reference, the average buy now, pay later transaction size is only $135. And my guess is that as this trend gets more popular, the average amount is only going to get smaller. If you think about it, buy now, pay later structure works a lot like a mortgage for a house. You pay in installments over time, and in some ways, it's even better than a mortgage because if you pay on time, there's no interest. That said, at least with a house, you are financing something that, for one, has a good chance of appreciating in value over time, and two, you feel the weight of that responsibility. But with buy now, pay later, it's the same structure applied to stuff that loses value fast. Clothing hauls, a new laptop, tomorrow's food. Spoiler, the food that you eat is not appreciating in value after you eat it. Unless you have a very weird, very rich secret admirer with a unique proclivity and you yourself have a very open mind and maybe some plastic bags. Please do not think about that joke too deeply. Anyways, because these kinds of purchases feel small, we brush them off until all those little payments turn into real debt.
I was just shocked on how much I was adding to the cart, but I'm officially going to be free from them tomorrow after I pay this $340.
Now, before I fully roast the cons of buy now, pay later, it wouldn't be fair to not include what's actually pretty good about them. Like the fact that it really is convenient for budgeting if you use it responsibly. By spreading a payment into equal smaller installments, you can avoid big cash flow hits to your bank account all at once, especially for bigger but necessary purchases like a new mattress or a laptop for school. Personally, I think it's better to just pay something all at once if you can, because I truly believe in that idea of don't buy something unless you can afford it twice, and treat things like credit cards or platforms like Klarna and Afterpay as if they're debit cards, not free money. Another good thing about buy now, pay later schemes is that they are interest-free if you pay on time. That is one of their most enticing selling points. The problem is the insane interest rates that hit if you don't pay on time. More on that later. A couple more good things about buy now, pay later schemes. One is that it's much more accessible to those who have poor credit scores. Basically, if you have a bad credit score, it can be sometimes tricky to get approved for credit cards, but buy now, pay later platforms are usually a lot less strict. Now, that can be good in a sense because it can make financing more accessible, but also you could argue that it's actually just evidence of how buy now, pay later schemes are preying on those who already have a history of struggling to repay on time. The creator, That's My Boy Jacob, has a funny yet unsettling video posted about the Klarna DoorDash deal and the situation's similarities with the mortgage bubble crisis that's featured in The Big Short.
Do customers ever get rejected? Seriously? If they get rejected, I suck at my job. Corporate doesn't care. We're just trying to let the people eat, right? Why let them starve to death? We're helping the cause. You don't verify.
Go follow him, by the way. His videos are great. The last thing I will say about buy now, pay later's pros is that sometimes, keyword, sometimes, it can help with building credit. But this is only if you are paying on time and the platform is actually reporting your information, which not every buy now, pay later platform is doing. Now, those are the good things about buy now, pay later. But unfortunately, I think overall it possesses a whole lot more risks than rewards. And if you're not careful, buy now, pay later has the chance to royally screw over your life. And here's why. For one, the whole setup is designed to encourage overspending. Micropayments break your full cost into these small, digestible chunks so that your expensive things feel like cheap things, except they're not. If every time you buy something, you don't have to feel the full weight of the cost or spend the total amount in the moment, you're gonna easily start piling on more and more expenses. You're gonna trick yourself into thinking that you can afford more than you actually can.
Another one, thank you. Another one, thank you.
Take the trend of putting designer brand items on buy now, pay later plans. Doesn't that feel insane? I mean, I know I'm already biased and a bit of a designer brand hater because designer brand stuff is all about flexing culture and I think it's a bit of a waste of money. But to have to put a designer bag on a buy now, pay later financing plan, if you have to do that, there is an overwhelmingly strong chance that you can't afford and shouldn't be buying that item in the first place. What is so tricky about buy now, pay later is that kind of like a drug, it makes you feel great at first without making you think about the consequences. You can buy and buy to your heart's desire. Those $200 shoes seemingly become $25. That $5,000 vacation you wanted to go on is basically a $300 vacation, right? Wrong. The consequences, they catch up. I know I sound like a angry parent or some lady who works in the DARE program back in the day telling you that you're going to end up behind a dumpster if you even dare to take a sip of Coca-Cola, but it's true. Not the Coca-Cola part, but the consequences of purchases piling up because of buy now, pay later plans. If that wasn't clear. Because what happens isn't just that you might buy more things up front, but you could also fall into debt creep down the line. Let's say that you finance a $120 pair of sneakers. That's $30 for 4 months. It's not a big deal, right? But then you do the same for a new $200 coat. Another $50 a month. Then a $90 skincare haul, $22.50 a month. A $150 standing desk becomes $37.50 a month. And finally, a $75 dinner for you and your friend, $18.75 a month. Suddenly, you are looking at over $150 a month in buy now, pay later payments alone, just from a bunch of small purchases that felt manageable in the moment. And if you miss one of these payments, that is when the real trouble starts. Sure, buy now, pay later platforms give you an interest-free window, but if you don't pay in that window, you could be facing aggressive late fees or even looking at interest rates up to 36%. For reference, the average annual credit card interest rate last year was around 24%. And that's already a crazy high and arguably predatory rate. Back to that woman who fell into $4,000 of debt from buy now, pay later purchases, she explains that, quote, one day you look at your account and you realize you owe so much money. This isn't just her either. According to LendingTree, 1 out of 3 buy now, pay later customers have paid late in the past year. And if you're using a platform that reports to credit bureaus, your credit score could take a huge hit, making it even harder to apply for other types of loans, which in turn is going to make you more and more likely to rely on things like buy now, pay later schemes. A vicious cycle, my friend, a vicious cycle. And often from what feels like harmless shopping sprees.
I have spent $32,196.23 on Affirm and Klarna since 2022. You can pretty much purchase anything you want almost on Affirm and Klarna.
Maybe some of you might be thinking, that doesn't seem safe for people, right? Like, this is a system that's targeting impulse shoppers and those with tight budgets and those with bad credit history. Truly a triple whammy. And it's a system that has aggressive penalties if you don't pay on time. It feels like we're just setting these people up to fail. And you know what? If you're thinking that, I think you're onto something. The buy now, pay later space is interesting in that it's not very regulated to keep customers safe. Just a couple months ago, the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau released a report revealing that the majority of buy now, pay later customers had, quote, subprime or deep subprime credit scores. That is fancy talk for bad credit scores. And as Jennifer Chen from Consumer Reports explains, quote, buy now, pay later loans fall into a legal gray area that leaves consumers vulnerable to getting tripped up by unfair practices without the protections they get with other forms of credit. You'd think that with all of this, the lack of protections, the debt traps, the credit score risks, that people would be running away from buy now, pay later platforms. And yet, like we said at the start of the video, the opposite is happening. It is hotter than ever, and I do not think it's going away anytime soon. With that in mind, what should you do to be smart when using buy now, pay later schemes? One option, the one that I personally pursue, is just avoid them altogether. I'm a big fan of credit cards personally. I like the protections and the rewards, though I treat credit cards as if they're a debit card, meaning I only spend money that I know I can afford, that I have available. I make sure I have an emergency fund, and I pay off the balance completely every single month. And if I do need a bigger purchase, I save for it over time. Old school budgeting, set aside the money every month until I can afford whatever it is that I need. Yes, it means having to practice delayed gratification, and yes, it is not as dopamine inducing, I get it, but it also means not having to deal with debt spirals or the stress of wondering how many payment plans I have floating out there in the ether right now. Now, if you do decide to use buy now, pay later schemes, I would say use them very carefully. Make sure that you can afford whatever you're buying. Be sure to automate your payment so that you never miss an installment. And as much as you can, practice intentional buying. Impulse shopping is so easy to fall into, and online retailers are only making it easier with things like buy now, pay later options. But do not let yourself be controlled by this kind of mindless spending. You know how there's always talks of practicing self-care? This is one way that you can actually practice self-care for yourself, by being intentional with your money and protecting your financial health. That right there is real self-care. But what do you guys think? Have you guys used buy now, pay later platforms, or do you know someone who has used them? What's their experience been like? What's your experience been like? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below and what topics you want to see me cover next. I'd also love to hear what types of videos of mine you found most helpful or most memorable. I'm trying to figure out my next few months' topics that I'm going to cover in content, so I would love your thoughts on all of that. Thank you so much to my patrons on Patreon and those on Buy Me a Coffee for supporting this channel. And thank you again for strawberry.me for sponsoring today's video. Don't forget to subscribe, and I will see you guys next time. Bye. Let's talk about buy now, pay later. This is my symbol for later.